US President Donald Trump dominated headlines after he and his wife Melania Trump tested positive for COVID-19. Amid Trump's health scare, top White House officials have taken a call to block strict new federal guidelines for the emergency release of a coronavirus vaccine. They are objecting to a provision that would almost certainly guarantee that no vaccine could be authorized before the US election, which is scheduled on November 3rd. It is obvious that the Trump administration continues to seek a political shot in the arm in vaccine push as elections near, hoping that one gets approved before election day, and not everyone is happy about how they are going about it.
You know, people would love to have a cure in a week or a vaccine in a week. I mean, that's not feasible, but the speed with which I think sort of good therapeutics and vaccines will be developed for SARS-CoV-2 to prevent COVID-19 is going to be spectacular.
Meanwhile, the United States Food and Drug Administration is seeking other avenues to ensure that vaccines meet the guidelines.
You know, what the FDA is proposing is really a pretty minimum standard. It's basically saying everybody who's been in the clinical trial, who's gotten a vaccine, should be followed for at least 2 months before we decide that the vaccine is safe.
But how close are we to getting a vaccine? US-based pharmaceutical company Moderna stated that they have elicited a strong immune response in older men and women with no serious adverse effects. They are seeking an emergency FDA approval for its COVID-19 vaccine, mRNA-1273, after November 25th. And they are not the only ones racing against time to develop a vaccine that can end the international health emergency. Governments have been claiming that a vaccine is around the corner for months now.
We will deliver a safe and effective vaccine before the end of the year, and it could be very, very soon.
It's going to continue to be bumpy through to Christmas. It may even be bumpy beyond.
Насколько мне известно, сегодня утром впервые в мире зарегистрирована вакцина против новой коронавирусной инфекции.
भारत की वैक्सीन प्रोडक्शन और वैक्सीन डिलीवरी क्षमता पूरी मानवता को इस संकट से बाहर निकालने के लिए काम आएगी।
The truth is that 10 months into the coronavirus pandemic, no vaccine has been approved yet. Here's a quick snapshot of how the leading vaccine projects are progressing. In all, about 142 vaccines are in the preclinical stage. 35 vaccines entered phase 1 with small-scale trials. 19 made it to phase 2, which involves expansion of vaccine trials. And 11 vaccines were tested during large-scale efficacy trials in phase 3. So when will the world get a vaccine? Who will get it first? Who will get it last? How will it reach every person on this planet? And most importantly, can a COVID-19 vaccine really end the pandemic? Let's find out. Let's begin with understanding the nitty-gritty of vaccine testing. What does the journey of a vaccine from a lab to a clinic look like? Whenever we talk about a new vaccine, this is the initial step that researchers and scientists take before clinical trials begin. Feasibility, testing, and drug safety data are collected in this stage, typically in laboratory animals. Scientists test the new vaccine on cells and then give it to animals, such as mice or monkeys, to see if it produces an immune response. The main goal of preclinical studies is to determine a starting, safe dose for the first in-human study. Once the preclinical testing happens successfully, scientists move to step 2 of the vaccine journey: Phase 1 safety trials. In this stage, scientists give the vaccine to a small number of people to test the safety and dosage. Researchers also try to confirm if the vaccine stimulates the immune system or not. Usually 20 to 80 participants take part in this phase of trials.
A number of different drug companies have developed vaccines. Some are made more traditional ways, others are using new innovative technology, and each of these vaccines is going through the testing process to make sure that they are safe to give to humans and to make sure that they actually work to produce an immune response that protects people from COVID.
Coming to phase 2 of the trials, usually known as the expanded trial phase, the number of participants increases in this phase. The vaccine is given to hundreds of people who are split into groups. The division of groups is based on age: children, middle-aged people, and the elderly. All take part in this phase of trial. Phase 2 trials are usually done to see how the vaccine acts in different age groups. These trials further test the vaccine's safety and ability to stimulate the immune system. Around 100 to 300 people are roped in for phase 2 trials. Most phase 3 clinical trials include a large number of patients. Scientists give the vaccine to thousands of people and wait to see how many become infected. This is done in comparison to the people who have received a placebo. These trials determine if the vaccine will protect humans against the virus, in this case COVID-19, and if the results are positive, the vaccine is sent for approval. Once a vaccine is sent for approval, regulators in different countries review the trial results. They then decide whether to approve the vaccine or not. In situations like a pandemic, a vaccine may receive emergency use authorization before getting formal approval. Once a vaccine is licensed, scientists continue to monitor people who receive it to make sure it's safe and effective.
In the case of the vaccines for COVID, because this is a very urgent situation, there are some corners being cut. But they're not corners related to safety, or they're not supposed to be corners related to safety. In fact, all they've done is try and cut down the bureaucracy and red tape as much as possible to move things through the process as swiftly as possible with as few delays. And they've allowed the manufacturing process to happen concurrent with the phase 3 clinical trial. What that means is if the drug or vaccine doesn't turn out to be effective, then they expect that all of that manufactured doses will have to be thrown out.
Talking about the COVID-19 vaccine, China and Russia have approved vaccines without waiting for the results of phase 3 trials. Experts say the rushed process may have serious risks.
Really don't want to cut corners in terms of safety or efficacy when it comes to a vaccine. Another thing we need to understand about vaccines is that oftentimes they're not quite as effective as the ones we think of as our flagship vaccines. You know, measles vaccine works with just one shot and maybe 2 shots in some people, and is then able to create durable immunity that lasts the whole lifetime. Unfortunately, we're not going to see the same thing, especially with these first draft COVID vaccines. First draft doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to be unsafe, but it certainly means that they're probably not going to be as good as COVID vaccines that might come out in a few years.
We will need vaccines, and there is hope that by the end of this year we may have a vaccine. There is hope.
The World Health Organization Director Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus believes that a possible vaccine might be a reality by the end of 2020. 9 experimental vaccines are in the pipeline of the WHO-led COVAX Global Vaccine Facility. So when can you expect to get a jab in the arm? Experts are divided over the issue.
I think this is
Britain's Vaccine Task Force Chair, Kate Brigham, has said on record that those who believe that everyone in the population will be vaccinated are nurturing a misguided perception. According to her, the government is aiming to vaccinate about 30 million people out of a population of about 67 million. She said, and I quote, "There is going to be no vaccination of people under 18. It's an adult-only vaccine for people over 50, focusing on health workers and care home workers and the vulnerable." Bingham also said that vaccinating a wider section of the population may make sense only when a vaccine proves to be 95% effective, which is believed to be quite unlikely, while British Prime Minister Boris Johnson warned that it may be, in his words, bumpy through to Christmas and beyond.
I don't want to get people's hopes up on the vaccine unnecessarily, because I think there's a good chance, but it is not certain.
Britain suffered Europe's worst death toll from the virus, with the current total standing at over 42,300. Meanwhile, with an aim of speeding up any approval process in the region for a vaccine, the European health regulator has started reviewing data on 2 vaccines in real time. The vaccine developed by American pharmaceutical company Pfizer with the help of German biotechnology company BioNTech called BNT162b2, and AstraZeneca and Oxford University's vaccine AZD1222, or Shadow X1 nCoV-19. While AZD1222 uses a weakened version of a chimpanzee common cold virus to build immunity against COVID-19, Pfizer and BioNTech's vaccine uses ribonucleic acid, a chemical messenger that contains instructions for making proteins. But as these vaccines are getting reviewed, 3 companies involved in producing them have been sued for patent infringement, and that includes Pfizer and BioNTech. Apart from these 2, another American biotechnology company, Regeneron Pharmaceuticals, is also facing the heat. US-based Alele Biotechnology and Pharmaceuticals filed 2 lawsuits against the trio, alleging that Pfizer and BioNTech, with its investigational COVID-19 vaccine BNT162 and Regeneron's REGN-COV2 were developed using Alele's substance neon green fluorescent protein without their permission and without paying royalties for it. Interestingly, Regeneron REGN-COV2 is the same drug that was given to the US President Donald Trump as part of his treatment, an experimental cocktail of 2 antibodies. India, the world's 2nd worst affected country by coronavirus. As cases continue to surge, the country hopes to receive up to 500 million doses of coronavirus vaccine by July 2021.
Our rough estimate and target would be to receive and utilize 400 to 500 million doses, covering approximately 20 to 25 crore people by July 2021. The government is working round the clock to ensure that there is a fair and equitable distribution of vaccines once they are ready.
India is testing 3 potential vaccines, including one being developed jointly by the University of Oxford and pharmaceutical giant AstraZeneca. The vaccines will be mass-produced by India's Serum Institute, the world's biggest vaccine producer. In a scramble to secure vaccines for the country of 1.3 billion people, Serum Institute of India and other private companies have been teaming up with organizations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the US drug developer Novavax Inc.
सबसे बड़े वैक्सीन उत्पादक देश के तौर पर आज मैं वैश्विक समुदाय को एक और आश्वासन देना चाहता हूं। भारत की वैक्सीन प्रोडक्शन और वैक्सीन डिलीवरी क्षमता पूरी मानवता को इस संकट से बाहर निकालने के लिए काम आएगी। हम भारत में और अपने पड़ोस में फेज 3 क्लिनिकल ट्रायल्स की तरफ बढ़ रहे हैं। वैक्सीन की डिलीवरी के लिए कोल्ड चेन और स्टोरेज जैसी क्षमता बढ़ाने में भी भारत सभी की मदद करेगा।
Even when a vaccine is declared safe and effective, huge challenges will remain. All the countries will want it right away, but the hard truth is that there won't be enough doses for everyone. especially as some scientists suggest that most potential vaccines require 2 doses. Ideally, the first in line should be health workers and the people most vulnerable to the targeted infection, like the elderly. But historically, wealthy nations have cornered the market for the first doses, so how will the vaccines be fairly distributed to all? It is a global dilemma. And then there are the logistics.
So if you're in the business of shipping dangerous goods, handling dangerous goods, carrying dangerous goods, it's important that you have the most up-to-date information.
It will be a mammoth undertaking. It is estimated that the distribution will require a global airlift of at least 8,000 jumbo jets to reach a target of 7.8 billion people on the planet. The vaccines may require a typical temperature of 2 to 8 degrees Celsius, the range used for transporting drugs. Some planes may not be suitable for it. Once these Boeing 747s land, the vaccines will need to be stored at specialized drug facilities. Airports will have to build them. This entire calculation is based on the assumption that people will need to be inoculated only once. But what about those who may need multiple doses? That would increase the overall burden on airlines. Various airline companies are working on their route map for expanding their network to those countries that lack vaccine production capabilities. On October 2nd, Venezuela received its first shipment of Russia's Sputnik V coronavirus vaccine for stage 3 clinical trials. Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez said it was a historic moment for her country. At a ceremony at the airport where the consignment of vaccines was unloaded, Rodriguez praised Russian President Vladimir Putin for bringing what she called relief to the world through the development of the vaccine.
Today, Russia under the leadership of President Vladimir Putin brings relief again to the world, to humanity, with the first registered vaccine, and Venezuela as the first country in the Western Hemisphere to initiate these trials in stage 3. We are then formally receiving the first batch of vaccines.
Russia's vaccine uses a form of the virus that causes the common cold, modified to carry genes for the spike protein that coats the coronavirus, as a way to prime the body to recognize if a real COVID-19 infection comes along. But Moscow's enthusiasm for Sputnik V has faced criticism from international medical experts who caution that the trials to date have been insufficient. The truth is that the world's hopes of getting life back to normal are pinned on a vaccine, and governments will need to work with each other to immunize people and break the virus's ability to spread.
If these vaccine trials are successful, we can produce and distribute it here at home.
And when we find that vaccine, it must be available to everyone.
But there is one country that is certainly not standing up with the world on this issue. China had promised to carry out its vaccine trials in Bangladesh, but Beijing has gone back on the promise. Chinese drug maker Sinovac Biotech has written a letter to Bangladesh. It is demanding that the government of Sheikh Hasina fund the trial of the vaccine in Bangladesh. Bangladesh had approved human trials of China's COVID-19 vaccine on the 27th of August. The trial was supposed to begin by September end, and Sinovac was supposed to bear the cost of the trial. This agreement was part of China's vaccine diplomacy. It promised Bangladesh 100,000 doses of vaccine. It promised the Philippines quick access to the drug. Latin America and Caribbean nations were promised $1 billion in loans to buy the medicine. China was preying on lower and middle-income nations. Apart from these three countries, Sinovac is carrying out its trials in Indonesia, Turkey and Brazil. They are now placing the financial burden on Bangladesh. This brings us to the next point: monopolizing. In 1997, the highly active antiretroviral therapy became the new treatment standard for AIDS. It caused a 47% decline in death rates. But the high price of this drug sparked an outcry as millions in Africa and other regions who couldn't afford them died. Could something like this happen again? Well, did you know that wealthy countries have already locked up more than 1 billion doses of coronavirus vaccines? Experts worry that the rest of the world will be at the back of the queue in the global effort to defeat the pathogen. On September 25th, there were some sharp exchanges between China, Russia and the US at a virtual event titled Post-COVID-19 Global Governance.
Rules must be followed and commitments must be kept.
Обнажились те самые кризисные моменты.
Moreover, I'm disappointed on behalf of the people you
The
are
heated
trying
exchange
to reach.
happened after UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres decried the lack of international cooperation in tackling the still out-of-control coronavirus.
The pandemic is a clear test of international cooperation, a test we have essentially failed.
International cooperation is certainly needed to not only accelerate the development and production of new vaccines, but to also assure equitable access worldwide. And even if the race for a COVID-19 vaccine has a winner soon, don't expect the pandemic to end before 2022. Until then, wear your mask, wash your hands, practice social distancing, and stay as safe as you can.